Dylan Cross was a man who believed he had seen it all. Power, money, betrayal, but nothing prepared him for the truth hidden behind 5 black credit cards. When he set out to test the women around him, he expected greed and ambition. What he never expected was the quiet defiance of his housekeeper, Hazel, whose choices would shatter his cynicism and drag him into a world of raw humanity he had long forgotten. From that moment on, Dylan's life was no longer about wealth. It was about a discovery that would change everything. Hello. Welcome back to Eva's Stories. Thank you for sticking around with me. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. The Beacon Hill penthouse overlooked Boston Common like a fortress of glass and steel, but Dylan Cross felt more trapped than protected. He stood at the window, watching early morning joggers circle the park below, their breath forming small clouds in the crisp autumn air. His reflection stared back, 32 years old, dark hair perfectly styled, blue eyes that had learned to see through every lie before it was spoken. "Mr. Cross, your breakfast is ready." The voice came from behind him, soft but clear. Dylan turned to see Hazel Porter setting a tray on the marble dining table. She wore her usual uniform, a simple navy dress that somehow made her natural beauty more striking rather than hiding it. Her dark skin glowed against the morning light streaming through the windows, and her hair was pulled back in loose curls that had escaped their attempted restraint. She moved with quiet efficiency, never making eye contact longer than necessary. "Thank you, Hazel." He watched her pour his coffee with steady hands. "How long have you worked for me now?" 3 years next month, sir." She straightened the newspaper beside his plate. "Will there be anything else?" Dylan studied her face. No calculation in those green eyes. No hidden agenda in her expression. Just professional courtesy and something else he couldn't quite identify. "No, that's all." She nodded and headed toward the kitchen, humming off key under her breath. The melody was unrecognizable but somehow comforting. "What's your story, Hazel Porter?" Dylan found himself wondering, not for the first time. In 3 years, she had never asked for raises, never complained about overtime, never tried to leverage her position. She was the only person in his life who treated him like a regular human being instead of a walking bank account. His phone vibrated. A text from Candace Rivers. "Dinner tonight? I made reservations at Mistral. Can't wait to see you, baby." Dylan's jaw tightened. Last week's dinner had been a disaster. Candace had spent the entire evening taking selfies and posting about their romantic date, while barely touching her food. When dessert arrived, she had raised her wine glass in a toast, to us getting back together, despite the fact they had never broken up. The whole performance felt rehearsed, calculated to impress her social media followers more than him. Another chime. This time Vivian Sterling. "Missing you terribly, darling. Coffee today. I know you're busy conquering the world, but surely you have time for an old friend who still loves you more than ever." The words felt hollow. Vivian had dumped him 2 years ago when a tech mogul from Silicon Valley offered her a more exciting lifestyle. Now that Dylan's portfolio had doubled and his face had appeared on Forbes again, suddenly she remembered their deep connection. He scrolled through more messages. Brooke Maxwell, his assistant, requesting approval for a small company celebration that would cost $40,000. Felicity Ashworth inviting him to her charity gala, where his presence would guarantee substantial donations from people eager to network with him. Everyone wanted something. Everyone saw the money first, the man second. "Sir." Hazel's voice interrupted his spiraling thoughts. She stood in the doorway, holding his dry cleaning. "These just arrived. Just hang them in the closet." She hesitated. "Are you all right? You look." "I look what? Tired. Sad, maybe." Her honesty caught him off guard. Most people told him he looked powerful, successful, intimidating. Hazel saw tired and sad. "I'm fine." The words came out sharper than intended. Hazel didn't flinch. "Of course, sir. But maybe eat something. That coffee won't sustain you all day, and you have back-to-back meetings until 6. She disappeared before he could respond, leaving him staring at the space where she'd stood. When was the last time someone had worried about whether he was eating enough? The boardroom on the 42nd floor buzzed with nervous energy. Dylan's acquisition team sat around the polished conference table, presenting quarterly projections with the enthusiasm of people whose bonuses depended on his approval. The Henderson Group acquisition should close by December, Brooke was saying, her strawberry blonde hair catching the light as she gestured toward the presentation screen. Profit margins are projected to increase by 32% within the first year. Dylan nodded absently, his mind elsewhere. Through the window, he could see the harbor where cargo ships moved like toys in a bathtub. Did any of these people care about him beyond their paychecks? If he lost everything tomorrow, would they still return his calls? Mr. Cross. Brooke's voice cut through his thoughts. Did you want to review the Henderson contracts now or wait until after lunch? After lunch is fine. He stood abruptly. That's all for now. The room emptied quickly, everyone eager to escape before he changed his mind about something. All except Brooke, who lingered by the door. Dylan, I was wondering. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a seductive whisper. Maybe we could grab dinner tonight? Discuss the Henderson deal privately. There it was. The calculated interest that always appeared when his net worth climbed higher. Brooke had worked for him for 18 months without showing romantic interest until Forbes published their recent article about his expanding empire. I'm busy tonight. Her smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. Of course. Rain check. He didn't answer. Dylan returned home to find something unusual, the scent of actual cooking instead of takeout containers. He followed the aroma to the kitchen, where Hazel stood at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. What's all this? She looked up, startled. Oh, you're home early. I was just making soup for tomorrow. I can leave if you need the kitchen. Soup, chicken and vegetable. I always make extra and freeze portions. She wiped her hands on a dish towel. It's more economical than buying lunch every day. Dylan watched her move around his kitchen with easy familiarity. She had been here 3 years, but this was the first time he'd seen her cook anything more elaborate than his breakfast. It smells incredible. Would you like some? I made plenty. The offer surprised him. Hazel had always maintained professional boundaries, never overstepping or assuming familiarity. Are you sure? Of course. She ladled soup into a bowl and set it on the counter with fresh bread. You missed lunch again today. How did she know that? Dylan took a spoonful and nearly groaned with pleasure. The soup was rich and comforting, nothing like the expensive restaurant meals he usually consumed alone. This is amazing. Hazel smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her all day. My grandmother's recipe. She always said food tastes better when it's made with care instead of obligation. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was. Hazel's expression grew wistful. She raised me after my parents died. Taught me that kindness costs nothing but means everything. Dylan studied her face as she spoke. No manipulation in her voice, no calculated revelation designed to gain his sympathy. Just honest memory shared without expectation. His phone rang. Candace's name flashed on the screen. Aren't you going to answer? Hazel asked. No. He turned the phone face down. I'd rather finish this soup. Something shifted in Hazel's expression. Surprise, maybe approval. She turned back to the stove, humming that same off-key melody from the morning. For the first time in months, Dylan felt genuinely relaxed. No one was asking for anything. No one was performing for his benefit. Just a woman making soup and humming badly, treating him like a person instead of a prize. What would you do, he found himself thinking, if money wasn't an object? If you could have anything, be anything, do anything, what would you choose? The question crystallized into something more concrete. An experiment. A test. Not to confirm his cynicism, but to challenge it. To see if anyone in his life was capable of surprising him. Hazel. Yes, sir. How would you feel about a raise? She turned, confused. I haven't asked for one. I know. That's why you're getting one. Dylan sat in his leather chair, surrounded by legal documents and credit card applications. 5 black American Express Centurion cards lay spread across his desk like weapons in an arsenal. Each card had no spending limit. Each represented unlimited financial freedom for exactly 1 week. Tomorrow, he would conduct an experiment that would either confirm his worst fears about human nature or shatter his carefully constructed walls forever. He picked up his phone and began typing messages. To Vivian, missing you too. Let's fix that. Dinner tomorrow. To Candace, free this week? Want to spoil you. To Brooke, about that rain check. To Felicity, interested in discussing a charitable partnership. And finally, he walked to the kitchen where Hazel was finishing the dishes. Hazel, I have an unusual request. She dried her hands, waiting. I'm conducting a social experiment about generosity and human nature. I'd like you to participate. Her eyebrows rose. What kind of experiment? Dylan pulled the 5th black card from his pocket. For 1 week, I want you to use this credit card. Buy anything you want. Go anywhere you want. Do anything you want. No limits, no questions asked. Hazel stared at the card like it might bite her. Sir, I can't accept that. It's not a gift. It's research. I'm genuinely curious about what people do when money isn't an obstacle. What if I say no? Then you say no. But I hope you won't. Hazel took the card with trembling fingers. 1 week. 1 week. Starting tomorrow. She studied the black plastic rectangle, then looked up at him with those clear green eyes. Can I ask why you're doing this? Dylan considered lying, giving her some corporate explanation about market research or consumer behavior. Instead, he found himself telling the truth. Because I want to know if there's anyone left in this world who might surprise me. Hazel nodded slowly. And if I don't surprise you, I mean, then at least I'll know for certain. She slipped the card into her pocket. 1 week. 1 week. As Dylan watched her leave, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine anticipation. Not for a business deal or acquisition, but for the unknown. Tomorrow, the experiment would begin. Tomorrow, he would discover whether his cynicism was justified or if somewhere in his carefully controlled world, authentic goodness still existed. He had no idea that by week's end, everything he thought he knew about human nature, and about himself, would be turned upside down by a woman who bought hot dogs instead of diamonds and chose to love the unloved instead of herself. The morning sun cast long shadows across Dylan's penthouse as he stood in his walk-in closet, selecting a navy Tom Ford suit. Today felt different. Electric. Like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing you're about to jump but not sure if you'll fly or fall. His phone vibrated with confirmations. Vivian had accepted dinner at Ostra for tonight. Candace wanted to meet for lunch at the Four Seasons. Brooke suggested drinks after work. Felicity proposed afternoon tea at the Ritz-Carlton to discuss his generous charitable interests. 4 women. For opportunities to prove his theory about human nature. And then there was Hazel. Dylan found her in the kitchen, preparing his usual breakfast with the same quiet efficiency as always. The black credit card sat on the counter beside her, untouched since last night. Good morning, sir. She poured his coffee without looking up. Beautiful day, isn't it? Are you having second thoughts about our experiment? Hazel glanced at the card, then at him. Honestly? Yes. It feels wrong somehow. Wrong how? Like I'm being tested. Her directness surprised him again. Which I suppose I am. Dylan studied her face. No resentment in her expression, just honest uncertainty. You could still say no. I could. She picked up the card, turning it over in her hands. But you said you wanted to be surprised. Maybe I do too. Surprised by what? By what I discover about myself when consequences don't matter. She slipped the card into her apron pocket. When do I start? Now, if you want. Take the day off. Go explore what unlimited freedom feels like. Hazel nodded slowly. Will you be all right without me today? The question caught him off guard. When was the last time someone had worried about his well-being instead of their own? I'll manage. There's soup in the refrigerator if you get hungry. She untied her apron, folding it carefully. And sir, thank you for trusting me with this. She left through the service entrance, the same way she'd arrived every morning for 3 years. But something fundamental had shifted. Dylan felt it in the silence she left behind. The cards are active, Jake Sullivan said, sliding a tablet across Dylan's desk. His driver and closest friend had helped orchestrate the logistics without asking too many questions. All 5 have unlimited spending power for exactly 1 week. Dylan scrolled through the account dashboard. 5 names, 5 cards, 5 opportunities to peer behind carefully constructed masks. You sure about this, boss? Jake's weathered face showed concern. Playing with people's emotions like this. I'm not playing with anything. I'm simply removing financial barriers and observing natural behavior. And if they all disappoint you? Dylan looked out at Boston Harbor, where ferries carried people to destinations unknown. Then at least I'll stop wondering. His computer chimed with the first notification. A transaction had been processed. Vivian Sterling, $2,847 at Saks Fifth Avenue, 10:43 a.m. Dylan wasn't surprised. Vivian had always believed her beauty required constant financial maintenance. What surprised him was how quickly she'd started spending. Another chime. Another transaction. Felicity Ashworth, $5,200 at Cartier, 10:52 a.m. Then another. Candace Rivers, $3,400 at Neiman Marcus, 11:15 a.m. The pattern was exactly what he'd expected. Luxury goods, designer items, expensive indulgences. Each purchase confirmed his growing cynicism about human nature. But there was no activity from Hazel's card. Or from Brooks. Maybe some people need time to process unlimited freedom, Jake suggested, reading over his shoulder. Maybe. Dylan closed the laptop. I have lunch with Candace at noon. Monitor the accounts and text me if anything interesting happens. Candace Rivers glided through the Bristol lounge like she owned it, drawing stares in a scarlet Hermes dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her sleek black hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, her smile calculating. Dylan, darling. She kissed his cheek, leaving a trace of expensive perfume. You look absolutely delicious today. They were seated at a corner table with views of the public garden. Candace ordered champagne and caviar without looking at prices. I have to tell you, she said, leaning forward conspiratorially. Your generosity this morning was completely unexpected. But so very you. What did you buy? Just a few essentials. A dress for tonight, some shoes, a handbag. She waved dismissively. Nothing extravagant. Dylan had seen the receipts. $3,000 wasn't extravagant in Candace's world, but it revealed her priorities clearly enough. I was thinking, Candace continued, maybe we should make this week special. Really special. I saw the most amazing suite at the Mandarin Oriental. We could spend a few days there, just us, away from all the stress. How much is the suite? Does it matter? She reached across the table to touch his hand. Money is just numbers, Dylan. What matters is us. Us. The word felt hollow coming from someone who'd started spending his money within hours of receiving it. His phone vibrated. A text from Jake. Still no activity from H or B. V just dropped $8K at Louis Vuitton. F bought a $12K bracelet. Something important? Candace asked, noticing his distraction. Just work. Always work with you. She pouted prettily. When are you going to learn to live a little? Money is meant to be enjoyed. Is that what you're doing? Enjoying my money? Candace's smile faltered for just a moment. Our money, darling. What's yours is mine, isn't it? That's how relationships work. Dylan signaled for the check. I should get back to the office. But we haven't finished lunch. I've seen enough. The afternoon meeting with Felicity Ashworth took place at her Commonwealth Avenue mansion, a testament to old Boston money and older social connections. She received him in her sitting room, surrounded by fresh orchids and original oil paintings. "Dylan, how wonderful of you to come." Felicity's gray eyes sparkled with predatory intelligence. "I've been thinking about your generous offer all morning." She was wearing the Cartier bracelet she'd purchased hours earlier, Dylan noticed. $12,000 of his money glittering on her wrist. "I have some exciting ideas for our charitable partnership," she continued, pulling out an elaborate presentation folder. "My annual winter gala could raise substantial funds for underprivileged children." Dylan flipped through her proposal. The gala would cost $200,000 to host, with only 30% actually reaching the children. The rest would go to administrative costs and venue expenses. "Of course, I'd need a new gown for the occasion," Felicity added casually. "Something that makes the right statement about our shared commitment to philanthropy." "How much for the gown?" "Oh, just a modest $15,000. Image is so important in charity work, don't you think?" Dylan closed the folder. "Let me think about it." "Of course, darling. But don't think too long. The best venues book quickly." As he left Felicity's mansion, Dylan felt the familiar weight of disappointment settling in his chest. Another person, another angle, another way to transform his generosity into personal gain. His phone chimed again. "Jake, V at spa, 3K treatment. C booked helicopter tour, 5K. F just bought 15K gown at Vera Wong. Still nothing from H or B." Dylan met Brooke at Trade, an upscale bar near his office building. She arrived 15 minutes late, slightly breathless and apologetic. "I'm so sorry," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "I was at the bank setting up some investments." "Investments?" Brooke's eyes lit up. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. Your generosity this morning got me thinking about my future. About our future." She pulled out her phone, showing him screenshots of stock portfolios and mutual funds. "I've been researching growth opportunities. With the right investments, we could build something together. A real partnership." Dylan studied the screen. She'd spent the morning not shopping, but researching ways to multiply his money. It was still self-serving, but at least it showed intelligence. "We?" he asked. "Well, yes. I know how you think, Dylan. I understand your vision. Who better to help you grow your wealth than someone who already knows your business inside and out?" There it was. The angle. Brooke wasn't interested in luxury goods or expensive experiences. She wanted a piece of his empire. "I've also been thinking about us," she continued, moving closer. "About what we could be together. Power couple, you know? Your business acumen, my organizational skills." Brooke. "Yes. Have you made any purchases today?" She looked confused. "Purchases? No, I've been too busy planning our future. Why would I waste money on things when I could invest it instead?" Dylan finished his drink. "I should go. But we haven't talked about dinner. Or tonight. Or..." Rain check. Dylan returned home to silence. No humming from the kitchen. No sounds of quiet activity. Hazel's absence felt more pronounced than he'd expected. He checked the account dashboard again. 4 cards showed significant activity. Vivian had spent $18,000 on clothes, jewelry, and spa treatments. Candace had added a helicopter tour and luxury hotel reservations to her shopping spree. Felicity had purchased the $15,000 gown along with matching accessories. Brooke had made several investment purchases, treating his money like seed capital for their imaginary partnership. But Hazel's card showed zero activity. Dylan felt a strange mix of disappointment and curiosity. Had she decided not to participate? Was she saving the experiment for later? Or was she proving his point in a different way by not using the card at all? His doorbell rang. Vivian stood in the hallway, stunning in a black cocktail dress that hugged her curves perfectly. Her platinum hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and she wore diamond earrings that caught the light like captured stars. "Ready for dinner, darling?" She stepped into his apartment without waiting for an invitation. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of upgrading our reservation. Ostra was so ordinary. We're dining at L'Espalier instead." "You changed our reservation?" "I knew you wouldn't mind. And I may have mentioned to a few people that we'd be there tonight. You know how word spreads in our circle." Dylan understood. Vivian wanted to be seen with him at Boston's most exclusive restaurant. She wanted their reunion to be public, photographed, and talked about. "You look incredible," he said, meaning it. Vivian had always been beautiful, but tonight she was breathtaking. "Thank you, darling. Your generosity made it possible." She touched the diamond earrings. "Do you like them? I thought they'd complement the dress." $8,000 for earrings to wear to dinner. Dylan nodded. "They're perfect. I'm so glad you think so." Vivian moved closer, her perfume intoxicating. "Dylan, I've been thinking about us. About how foolish I was to let you go. Can you forgive me?" Looking into her eyes, Dylan wanted to believe her. Wanted to think that maybe, just maybe, her feelings were genuine. But the receipts on his phone told a different story. $18,000 spent in one day, followed by a perfectly timed reconciliation attempt. "We should go," he said. "Our reservation is at 8. As they left for dinner, Dylan caught sight of his reflection in the hallway mirror. He looked like a man going through the motions, playing a part in someone else's script. 3 women had shown him exactly who they were when money became unlimited. Tomorrow, he would see what Hazel had chosen to do with her freedom. The real test was just beginning. Dylan woke to the sound of rain against his bedroom windows and the absence of Hazel's off-key humming. The silence felt wrong, like a song missing its melody. He reached for his phone, checking the transaction dashboard that had become his morning ritual. The numbers told a predictable story. Vivian's spending had reached $28,000 overnight, including a midnight shopping spree at an exclusive boutique that stayed open late for VIP clients. Candace had booked a weekend spa retreat in the Berkshires for $12,000. Felicity had added a professional photographer to document her charity gala planning, another $8,000. Brooke had purchased stock options and enrolled in an executive MBA program, viewing education as investment in their shared future. But Hazel's card remained untouched. 42 hours of unlimited financial freedom, and not a single transaction. Dylan's chest tightened with an emotion he couldn't name. Disappointment? Relief? Something else entirely? His phone rang. Vivian's name flashed on the screen. "Good morning, darling. Did you sleep well?" Her voice carried the satisfied purr of someone who'd spent the previous evening being worshipped at Boston's most exclusive restaurant. "Well enough. I was thinking we should make today special too. I found the most divine little gallery in the South End. They're having a private showing of contemporary pieces. I thought we could attend together, maybe find something beautiful for your penthouse." Dylan knew without asking that something beautiful would cost enough to fund a small nonprofit for a year. "I'm busy today." "Oh." The disappointment in her voice sounded rehearsed. "Well, perhaps I could select a few pieces for your consideration? I do have excellent taste." "Perhaps not." A pause. "Dylan, is everything all right? You seem distant." Distant. The word hung between them like smoke. How could he explain that watching someone spend his money with such casual entitlement made him feel like a walking credit line rather than a human being? "I'm fine. Just work." "You work too much, darling. Life is for living, not just earning." Easy words from someone who'd never had to earn anything, Dylan thought. "I'll call you later." He hung up and immediately dialed Jake. "Any word from Hazel?" "Nothing, boss. She never came home last night." Dylan felt an unexpected spike of concern. "What do you mean she never came home?" "I drove by her apartment in Jamaica Plain around 11. No lights, no car in the driveway. Looks like she stayed somewhere else." Where would Hazel spend the night? Dylan realized he knew almost nothing about her life outside his penthouse. Did she have friends? A boyfriend? Family. Keep monitoring the accounts, he said. And Jake. If you see any activity on Hazel's card, text me immediately. Dylan's morning meeting with his acquisition team dragged like a funeral procession. The Henderson Group deal required his signature on 17 documents, but his mind kept wandering to a woman who hummed off-key and made soup from scratch. Mr. Cross. Brooke's voice cut through his distraction. Did you want to review the financing terms again? She sat across the conference table in a new outfit that probably cost $2,000, her strawberry blonde hair styled in a sophisticated updo that screamed professional ambition. Everything about her appearance said executive material, from her tailored blazer to her understated jewelry. The terms are fine. Dylan signed the last document with more force than necessary. Excellent. Brooke gathered the papers with practiced efficiency. I also wanted to update you on those investment opportunities we discussed yesterday. I've scheduled meetings with 3 different wealth management firms for next week. Cancel them. Cancel them? But Dylan, these are incredible opportunities for growth. For us. There it was again. Us. The presumption that his money was somehow their money, that his success was their partnership. There is no us, Brooke. There's me, and there's my employee. Brooke's composed mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something harder underneath. Of course, sir. I was simply trying to be helpful. Helpful would be doing your actual job instead of planning my financial future. The room fell silent. Dylan's acquisition team studied their hands, suddenly fascinated by their fingernails. Brooke's face flushed red, but she nodded curtly. Understood. Will there be anything else? That's all. As the room emptied, Dylan felt a familiar hollowness settle in his chest. Another relationship reduced to its transactional components. Another person who saw dollar signs instead of a human being. His phone vibrated. A text from Candace. Missing you terribly. This spa retreat would be so much better with you here. Why don't you helicopter up for lunch? I've already arranged everything. Dylan deleted the message without responding. Another vibration. Felicity. Darling, the most marvelous thing has happened. Vogue wants to feature our charity gala in their December issue. But they'll need to photograph us together for the spread. Could you clear your calendar for Thursday? Delete. Another message, this time from Vivian. The gallery pieces are even more stunning than I imagined. I've put 3 on hold for your approval. Only $45,000 for the set. A bargain for such beauty. Delete. Dylan looked out at Boston Harbor, where tugboats pushed massive cargo ships toward unknown destinations. Everyone wanted to steer his ship, but no one cared where he actually wanted to go. Dylan found himself driving through Hazel's neighborhood, a diverse area of Boston known for its artists, immigrants, and working-class families. The contrast to Beacon Hill was stark. No doormen or marble lobbies here. Just triple-deckers with front porches, corner bodegas, and laundromats where people actually did their own washing. He parked outside Hazel's address, a modest 2-family house with peeling paint and a small garden that someone had lovingly maintained despite the approaching winter. Marigolds and mums bloomed in defiance of the November cold. What was he doing here? Dylan couldn't answer that question, even to himself. He just knew that Hazel's silence felt wrong. 42 hours with unlimited spending power, and not a single purchase. It didn't make sense. Unless she was proving a point. Unless her refusal to spend was its own form of judgment. Dylan's phone rang. Jake's number. Boss, you need to see this. What is it? Transaction just came through on Hazel's card. But it's not what you'd expect. Dylan's pulse quickened. How much? $237. At Market Basket Grocery Store. Groceries. While 4 other women had spent tens of thousands on luxury items, Hazel had bought groceries. That's not all, Jake continued. There's been a pattern of small purchases over the last 2 hours. Hardware store, toy store, party supply shop. Nothing over $50 each. Send me the full list. Dylan's phone chimed with a detailed breakdown. Paintbrushes and drop cloths from Home Depot. Discount toys from a second-hand shop. Streamers and balloons from Party City. Hot dogs and hamburger buns from Market Basket. Enough food to feed an army. Or a party. Jake, I need you to track down where she went after the grocery store. Already on it. GPS shows her heading toward Roxbury. Roxbury. One of Boston's most economically challenged neighborhoods. What would Hazel be doing there with party supplies and enough food for 50 people? Dylan started his car, following the trail of small purchases like breadcrumbs leading through a fairy tale. But instead of finding a gingerbread house, he might discover something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about human nature. The Riverside Haven Children's Home sat on a tree-lined street between a community garden and a small playground. The building was old but well-maintained, with bright yellow paint and window boxes full of winter pansies. A hand-painted sign by the front door read, "Every child deserves love." Dylan parked across the street, watching through his windshield as volunteers carried supplies from several cars into the building. He recognized some of the items from Hazel's purchase list. Streamers, balloons, party supplies. But where was Hazel? His question was answered when the front door opened and a figure emerged that made him blink twice. A woman in a rainbow wig and polka-dot costume was setting up what looked like a carnival game on the front lawn. Red nose, oversized shoes, the whole ridiculous outfit. It took Dylan several seconds to recognize the graceful movements beneath the costume. Hazel. She was dressed as a clown. Dylan watched in stunned silence as Hazel transformed the children's home grounds into a carnival. She set up ring toss games, arranged tables for food, and hung colorful streamers from every available surface. Her movements were efficient but joyful, like someone who'd done this many times before. Children began appearing in the windows, their faces pressed against the glass with obvious excitement. Dylan could see their mouths moving, probably calling to friends about the spectacle being created outside. His phone vibrated. Another transaction notification. Hazel Porter, $127.50 at CVS Pharmacy. What could she possibly need from a pharmacy for a children's party? The answer came when Hazel emerged from her car carrying bags of first aid supplies, children's medicine, and vitamins. She wasn't just throwing a party. She was restocking their medical supplies. Dylan sat in his car for an hour, watching Hazel work. She moved between tasks with quiet competence, speaking Spanish to some of the older children who helped carry supplies, high-fiving the younger ones who couldn't contain their excitement. At 4 o'clock, the party officially began. Children poured out of the building like water through a broken dam. Boys and girls ranging from toddlers to teenagers, all different ethnicities and backgrounds, united by the infectious joy of unexpected celebration. Hazel had arranged everything with military precision. Games for the older kids, craft tables for the artistic ones, a puppet show for the little ones. And food. Mountains of food. Hot dogs and hamburgers, fresh fruit, vegetables and dip, homemade cookies. But it was the way she interacted with the children that made Dylan's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. She knew their names. All of them. She remembered which ones were shy and needed gentle encouragement, which ones were natural leaders who could help organize games. When 8-year-old Tommy scraped his knee during a relay race, Hazel didn't just comfort him. She cleaned the wound with supplies from her CVS trip, applied a colorful bandage, and then distracted him by making the most ridiculous clown faces Dylan had ever seen. The boy's tears turned to giggles within minutes. Dylan found himself smiling, then caught himself. This was still part of the experiment. Hazel was still using his money, even if she was using it differently than expected. But as he watched her spend the next 3 hours dedicated entirely to making children happy, an uncomfortable truth began forming in his mind. This wasn't about the money. This was about Hazel. The credit card had simply enabled her to do what she would have done anyway, just on a larger scale. His phone rang. Vivian again. Dylan, darling, I've been trying to reach you all day. Where are you? Busy. Well, I hope you're not too busy to hear my exciting news. The gallery called. They'll hold those pieces until tomorrow, but they need a decision soon. $45,000 really is a steal for such beautiful art. Dylan watched Hazel help a teenage girl with cerebral palsy participate in a ring toss game, patiently adjusting the targets until success was possible. Dylan, are you there? I'm here. So, should I tell them yes? $45,000 for art that would hang on his walls, admired by no one but himself. Meanwhile, Hazel had spent $300 to bring joy to 50 children who had nothing. Tell them no. No. But Dylan, these pieces are investment quality. They'll only appreciate in value. I said no, Vivian. Silence. Then, I don't understand. Yesterday you were so generous, so loving. Today you're acting like money matters more than beauty, more than us. Money matters more than us. The irony was so thick Dylan almost laughed. Maybe it does. He hung up and turned off his phone. Across the street, Hazel was leading a group sing-along, her terrible voice mixing with children's pure tones to create something surprisingly beautiful. Tommy sat on her lap, chocolate from a cookie smeared across his face, looking at her like she'd hung the moon. Dylan had found his answer. But it wasn't the answer he'd expected, and it sure as hell wasn't the answer he'd wanted. Hazel Porter hadn't failed his test. She'd rendered it irrelevant. Dylan watched from his car as the children's party began winding down. Parents and guardians arrived to collect some of the kids, while others simply retreated inside the building. Hazel moved through the cleanup with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything, but now Dylan could see the deeper purpose behind her actions. She wasn't just cleaning up. She was making sure every child got one last hug, one final moment of individual attention before the magic ended. His phone had been vibrating incessantly for the past hour. Vivian, Candace, Brooke, Felicity, all wanting explanations for his sudden unavailability, all demanding his attention for their various schemes and purchases. He ignored them all. Instead, Dylan found himself getting out of his car. The November air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the distant promise of winter. He crossed the street slowly, unsure of what he intended to say or do. He just knew he couldn't sit in his car anymore, watching Hazel's world from a distance. "Sir." Hazel's voice carried surprise and something that might have been embarrassment. She stood by a folding table, still wearing the ridiculous clown costume, rainbow wig slightly askew. "What are you doing here?" Up close, Dylan could see that the polka dot outfit was homemade, carefully sewn but clearly not expensive. The red nose was plastic. The oversized shoes were actually her regular sneakers stuffed with newspaper. "I was curious about where you'd gone." Dylan gestured toward the scattered party supplies. "This wasn't what I expected." "Expected from what?" "From the experiment. From unlimited spending power." Hazel pulled off the rainbow wig, revealing her natural curls flattened against her head. Without the costume's distraction, Dylan could see fatigue in her green eyes, the kind that came from pouring your heart into something that mattered. "Is that what this was? An experiment?" Her voice carried no anger, just understanding. "I wondered why you'd suddenly become so generous with someone like me." "Someone like me." The phrase hit Dylan harder than he'd expected. "What do you mean, someone like you?" "Your housekeeper. Your employee. Someone who's invisible most of the time." Before Dylan could respond, a small voice interrupted them. "Miss Hazel, are you leaving now?" They turned to see Tommy, the 8-year-old with the scraped knee, standing in the doorway. His chocolate-stained face was clean now, but his eyes held the particular sadness of a child watching happiness end. "Not yet, sweetheart." Hazel knelt to his level, her voice automatically softening. "I'm just talking to my friend." Tommy studied Dylan with the frank assessment only children could manage. "Are you really her friend? You look too fancy to be Miss Hazel's friend." Dylan glanced down at his tailored suit, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked in this environment. "I'm trying to be good. Miss Hazel needs more friends." Tommy turned back to Hazel. "Sister Margaret wants to know if you're staying for dinner. She made your favorite." "What's her favorite?" Dylan found himself asking. "Chicken and rice with beans," Tommy answered seriously. "Miss Hazel taught Sister Margaret how to make it the way her grandma did. It's really good." Hazel's cheeks flushed. "Tommy, why don't you go tell Sister Margaret I'll be right in?" The boy scampered away, leaving Dylan and Hazel alone again. The silence stretched between them, filled with unasked questions and incomplete truths. "How long have you been coming here?" Dylan asked. 3 years. Since I started working for you." Hazel began folding the remaining tablecloths with precise movements. "I found this place by accident one day when I was walking home from the grocery store. Saw kids playing outside and just stopped." "And you've been volunteering ever since?" "Every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Most weekends." She paused in her folding. "They're good kids. They deserve better than what life has given them so far." Dylan looked toward the building where warm lights spilled from windows, creating rectangles of gold against the darkening sky. "Is that why you used the credit card here?" "For them. Partly." Hazel's honesty continued to surprise him. "But also because I wanted to see what it would feel like to give them everything they needed instead of just small gifts from my paycheck." "And how did it feel?" Hazel smiled, the first genuine smile Dylan had seen from her since this whole experiment began. "Like flying. Like being able to breathe for the first time in years." The building's front door opened, and an older woman emerged. She was probably in her mid-50s, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her simple dress and cardigan suggested either a teacher or a nun. "Hazel, dear, are you coming in? And who's your friend?" "Sister Margaret. This is Dylan Cross. My employer." Hazel's voice carried careful neutrality. "Dylan, this is Sister Margaret. She runs Riverside Haven." Sister Margaret approached with the confidence of someone accustomed to managing both children and adults. "Mr. Cross, how wonderful to finally meet you." "Finally. Hazel talks about you sometimes. Your kindness to her, the trust you place in her judgment." Sister Margaret's eyes held gentle intelligence. "She's very grateful for her job." Dylan felt heat rise in his face. Kindness. Trust. He'd barely noticed Hazel existed until yesterday, and now he was conducting psychological experiments on her. "I should be going," he said. "Nonsense." Sister Margaret's tone brooked no argument. "It's dinner time, and we always have plenty. Besides, I'd love to show you what Hazel's generosity accomplished today." Before Dylan could protest, Sister Margaret was steering him toward the building. Hazel fell into step beside them, still carrying the folded tablecloths. "Sister Margaret, I don't think Dylan wants to." "Of course he does." The older woman smiled. "Anyone who employs someone as wonderful as our Hazel must have excellent judgment himself." The interior of the children's home was nothing like the sterile institutional environments Dylan had imagined. The walls were painted in warm yellows and soft blues, covered with children's artwork and photographs of field trips and celebrations. Comfortable furniture filled the common areas, clearly donated but well-maintained and arranged with care. The dining room buzzed with controlled chaos as 23 children of various ages gathered around 3 large tables. The sounds of conversation, laughter, and clinking silverware created a symphony of family life that Dylan hadn't heard since his own childhood. "This is where the magic really happens," Sister Margaret said, leading them through the room. "Not in the parties or special events, but in the everyday moments. Homework help, bedtime stories, teaching someone to tie their shoes." Dylan watched Hazel automatically move toward a table where the younger children sat. She helped a little girl with pigtails cut her chicken into manageable pieces, reminded a boy to use his napkin, and listened patiently to a stream of important 6-year-old observations about the day's events. She belonged here. It was obvious in every gesture, every easy interaction, every child who turned to her with automatic trust. "How many children live here?" Dylan asked. "Currently 23, ranging from age 4 to 17. Some are temporary placements while we work on family reunification. Others are long-term residents waiting for adoption or aging out of the system." "And funding?" Sister Margaret's expression grew more serious. "Always a challenge. We receive some state funding, but it covers basic necessities only. Everything else depends on donations and fundraising." Dylan thought about Vivian's $45,000 art pieces, Candace's helicopter tours, Felicity's elaborate gala plans. What would you do with unlimited resources? "Oh my!" Sister Margaret's eyes lit up. Well, I'd start with updating our educational programs. Many of our children are behind academically due to disrupted schooling. Then maybe a proper playground. The current equipment is safe but limited. She gestured toward a bulletin board covered with photos of field trips and activities. We try to give them experiences beyond these walls. Museums, baseball games, the beach in summer. Children need to know the world is bigger than their current circumstances. How much would all that cost? For everything. Maybe $200,000 over several years. I know it sounds like a fortune, but... Dylan's mind did quick calculations. Less than Vivian had spent on clothes and jewelry in 2 days. Less than Candace would spend on her spa weekend. A fraction of what Felicity planned for her charity gala that would actually help far fewer children. Mr. Cross. A small voice interrupted his thoughts. Dylan looked down to find Tommy standing beside him, still wearing the colorful bandage Hazel had applied to his scraped knee. Yes. Are you going to eat with us? We have enough. Before Dylan could answer, Hazel appeared at his elbow. Tommy, Mr. Cross probably has other plans for dinner. Do you? Tommy asked with characteristic directness. Dylan thought about his empty penthouse, his silent kitchen, the takeout containers that comprised most of his meals. Actually, no. I don't have other plans. Tommy's face brightened. Good. You can sit next to me. I'll tell you about the carnival games Miss Hazel made. And somehow, Dylan found himself at a folding table in a children's home, eating chicken and rice while an 8-year-old gave him a detailed explanation of ring toss strategy. Hazel sat across from him, no longer in her clown costume but wearing simple jeans and a sweater that looked like it had seen many washings. She looked more beautiful than any woman in designer clothes he'd ever seen. Miss Hazel comes every week, Tommy was explaining around a mouthful of rice. She helps with homework and plays games, and sometimes she makes funny voices when she reads stories. Funny voices? Like this. Tommy launched into what was apparently his impression of Hazel reading Goldilocks and the Three Bears, complete with exaggerated accents for each character. Dylan found himself laughing. Actually laughing, not the polite chuckles he offered at business dinners or social functions. Real laughter that came from genuine amusement. Tommy's my best storytelling critic, Hazel said, her own laughter mixing with Dylan's. He keeps me honest. Miss Hazel is the best at voices, Tommy continued. Even better than the TV. As dinner progressed, Dylan began to understand something he'd never considered before. This wasn't charity work for Hazel. This wasn't volunteer obligation or social responsibility. This was family. These children looked at her with the easy affection of siblings. They brought her their problems, their excitement, their small triumphs and disappointments. She knew which ones needed extra encouragement with homework, which ones got homesick at bedtime, which ones were struggling with behavioral issues. She had built relationships here. Real relationships based on care and consistency and showing up, week after week, regardless of how tired she might be after working all day. Mr. Cross, Sister Margaret said as they finished dessert, would you like to see the rest of our facility? Hazel could show you around. Dylan glanced at Hazel, who nodded slightly. If you'd like. They spent the next hour touring the building. Hazel showed him the library she'd helped organize, pointing out which books were favorites and which ones needed replacing. She walked him through the art room where today's craft projects were drying on every available surface. She introduced him to the teenage residents who were doing homework in the study area, casual conversations that revealed how well she knew each young person's struggles and dreams. This is where I'd love to expand, Hazel said as they stopped outside a storage room. It could be a computer lab. Most of these kids have never had regular access to technology. They're going to need those skills. How do you know so much about their needs? I listen. Hazel's answer was simple. And I remember what it felt like to be powerless. To have adults make decisions about your life without asking what you actually needed. There was pain in her voice, carefully controlled but unmistakable. Dylan realized he knew almost nothing about Hazel's background, her childhood, the experiences that had shaped her into someone who could see invisible children and make them feel valued. Hazel, he began, then stopped. What could he ask? What right did he have to her history? You want to know why I care so much about this place, she said, reading his unfinished question. Only if you want to tell me. Hazel leaned against the doorframe, her eyes focused on something beyond the present moment. I was in foster care from age 7 to 18. Different homes, different families, different rules every few months. Some were kind, some weren't. None were permanent. Dylan felt something cold settle in his stomach. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me things about resilience, about finding family where you can create it. She gestured toward the common room where children were settling in for evening activities. These kids understand things other children don't. They know that safety isn't guaranteed, that adults can disappear, that you have to fight for every bit of love you get. But they also know how to appreciate kindness when they find it, Dylan said, beginning to understand. Exactly. When someone shows up consistently, when someone keeps promises, when someone sees them as individuals instead of problems to be managed, it means everything. They stood in comfortable silence, watching children play board games and work on puzzles. Dylan thought about his own childhood, surrounded by material comfort but often feeling emotionally isolated. His parents had provided everything money could buy but had been too busy building their fortune to build relationships with their son. These children had nothing material, but they had Hazel. They had someone who showed up, who listened, who remembered their preferences and celebrated their small victories. The experiment, Dylan said finally. What about it? You didn't fail it. You showed me that it was the wrong experiment entirely. Hazel turned to look at him, curiosity in her green eyes. How so? I was testing whether unlimited money would reveal people's true nature. But I was asking the wrong question. What should you have been asking? Dylan met her gaze, feeling something shift in his chest. Not what people do when they can have anything. What they do when they can give anything. The understanding that passed between them in that moment felt like the first honest communication Dylan had experienced in years. No manipulation, no hidden agendas, no performance designed to impress or influence. Just truth. His phone vibrated with another message, probably from Vivian or Candace or Brooke demanding his attention. Dylan turned it off without looking. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he had found something more important than managing other people's expectations. Sometimes the most profound revelations come not from the answers we get, but from realizing we've been looking in the wrong direction entirely. The evening activity period at Riverside Haven had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Younger children gathered in the main room for story time, while teenagers claimed the study area for homework and quiet conversation. Dylan found himself sitting on a worn but comfortable couch, watching Hazel read Charlotte's Web to a group of 8 children who hung on every word. She did indeed use different voices for each character, just as Tommy had promised. Wilbur was high and anxious, Charlotte wise and gentle, Templeton appropriately sneaky. The children giggled at her dramatic interpretations and gasped at the story's emotional moments. Dylan had intended to leave after dinner, but somehow the peaceful atmosphere had drawn him deeper into this unexpected world. Sister Margaret had provided him with coffee and settled into a nearby chair with her own book, occasionally glancing up to smile at the scene. She's remarkable with them, Sister Margaret said quietly during a pause in the story. I've worked with children for 30 years, and I've rarely seen someone connect so naturally with young people. How long did you say she's been volunteering here? 3 years, almost exactly. Started the week after Thanksgiving, 2021. I remember because she arrived during our holiday preparation, wanting to help with whatever we needed most. Dylan did quick mental math. Hazel had started volunteering the same week she'd begun working for him. While she was learning his routines and preferences, she was also learning the names and needs of 23 children. What made her choose this place? Sister Margaret's expression grew thoughtful. She never told you about her background? Not much. Just that she was in foster care. Ah. Sister Margaret nodded with understanding. That explains her connection to the children, and perhaps why she's been so private about her past. Before Dylan could ask what she meant, Hazel's voice rose from the story circle, reading Charlotte's famous words about friendship and sacrifice. Several children had moved closer to her during the reading. One little girl now curled against her side like a sleepy kitten. "She has a gift," Sister Margaret continued. "Not just with children, but with seeing what people need most. When she first arrived, we had a teenage boy named Marcus who'd been through 12 foster homes in 4 years. Angry, defensive, convinced that everyone would eventually give up on him." Dylan watched Hazel's gentle expression as she continued reading, understanding beginning to form in his mind. Hazel spent hours with Marcus that first month. Not trying to fix him or counsel him, just showing up consistently. Playing chess, helping with homework, listening to his music. By Christmas, he was a different child. Where is he now? Adopted by a wonderful family in Cambridge. Hazel still gets letters from him. Sister Margaret's smile was warm with memory. She has that effect. She helps children remember that they're worthy of love and attention. The story ended with Charlotte's death, and Dylan watched several children wipe tears from their eyes. Hazel's own voice had grown thick with emotion during the final passages, but she held herself together for the sake of her young audience. "Okay, my loves," she said softly. "Time for the younger ones to get ready for bed." As children dispersed toward bathrooms and bedrooms, Tommy lingered by Hazel's side. "Miss Hazel, will you tell me a special story tonight?" "Just for me." "What kind of special story?" "The one about the little girl who found her family." Something flickered across Hazel's face. "Pain, maybe, or deep memory." "Tommy, wouldn't you rather hear about dragons or pirates tonight?" "Please. I like the family story. It makes me feel better about being here." Hazel glanced toward Dylan, then back at Tommy. "All right, sweetheart. Go brush your teeth and I'll be up in a few minutes." Tommy scampered away, leaving Hazel sitting in the circle of empty chairs. Dylan moved from the couch to sit beside her, noting the tension in her shoulders. "The family story," he asked gently. "Something I made up for the kids who struggle with feeling unwanted." Hazel began stacking the scattered picture books. "It helps them understand that sometimes the family you find is better than the one you were born into." "Is it your story?" Hazel's hands stilled on the books. "Parts of it." Sister Margaret approached with practiced sensitivity. "Hazel, dear, I can handle bedtime stories tonight if you'd prefer." "No, it's fine. Tommy's had a big day, and the story really does help him sleep." Hazel stood, smoothing her sweater. "Dylan, you're welcome to wait here if you'd like. Or Jake could drive you home. I know this isn't how you plan to spend your evening." Dylan realized he hadn't thought about his usual evening routine in hours. No business calls to return, no social obligations to fulfill, no careful management of other people's expectations. Just the simple rhythm of children getting ready for bed and the comfort of being somewhere he was welcomed without agenda. "I'll wait," he said. Hazel nodded and headed upstairs. Sister Margaret settled back into her chair with a knowing smile. "She doesn't share that story with many people," the older woman said. "Even I've only heard pieces of it over the years." "What do you know about her childhood?" Sister Margaret considered the question carefully. Enough to understand why she's so protective of these children. Enough to know that she's overcome more than most people face in a lifetime. Dylan felt a growing need to understand the woman who had quietly revolutionized his perspective in the span of 48 hours. "Sister Margaret, would you tell me what you know? I realize I've employed Hazel for 3 years without really knowing her at all." The older woman studied his face with the careful assessment of someone accustomed to judging character. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she settled more comfortably in her chair. "Hazel entered foster care when she was 7, Sister Margaret began. Her grandmother had been raising her since she was 3, after her parents died in a car accident. When her grandmother passed away suddenly, there were no other family members willing or able to take her. Dylan felt his chest tighten. So she lost everyone. In the span of 4 years, yes. Parents, then the grandmother who'd become her whole world. Sister Margaret's voice carried the weight of professional experience with childhood trauma. The foster system meant well, but Hazel was moved frequently. Sometimes due to overcrowding, sometimes because of family situations that didn't work out. How many homes? 8 different placements over 11 years. Some lasted months, some barely lasted weeks. Dylan tried to imagine 7-year-old Hazel, grieving her grandmother and trying to navigate a constantly changing world of new rules, new families, new disappointments. The worst part, Sister Margaret continued, wasn't the frequent moves. It was the feeling that she was always temporary, always disposable. Children in that situation often develop a deep fear that love is conditional, that connection is temporary. But she seems so. Dylan searched for the right words. So generous with these children. So willing to form attachments. That's what makes her remarkable. Instead of protecting herself by avoiding emotional connection, she decided to ensure that other children never felt as alone as she did. From upstairs came the faint sound of Hazel's voice, telling Tommy his requested story. Her tone was gentle, weaving whatever tale would help an 8-year-old boy feel less afraid of his uncertain future. She told me once, Sister Margaret said, that she learned the difference between being wanted and being needed. Foster families needed her to be quiet, well-behaved, grateful. But no one really wanted her for who she was. Until she came here. Until she created this. A place where children are wanted for exactly who they are, flaws and fears and all. Dylan thought about his own relationships, built on performance and expectation. Vivian wanted his money and status. Candace wanted his lifestyle and social connections. Brooke wanted his business success and future potential. Felicity wanted his charitable contributions and networking opportunities. None of them wanted him. They wanted what he could provide. But Hazel had worked for him for 3 years without asking for anything beyond fair payment for honest work. She'd worried about his eating habits, respected his privacy, treated him with genuine kindness without expecting rewards. And now she was upstairs, helping a foster child feel less alone in the world. Sister Margaret, Dylan said slowly, what would it mean to these children to have truly stable funding? Not just for basic needs, but for programs, activities, education. The older woman's eyes sharpened with interest. It would mean the difference between survival and thriving, between managing problems and preventing them. How much would comprehensive programming cost annually? For everything. Educational support, counseling services, recreational activities, proper facilities. Sister Margaret paused, clearly calculating. Maybe $300,000 per year. It sounds like a fortune, but when you break it down per child. $13,000 per child annually. Dylan's mind was already working through the numbers. Less than most people spend on a car. Mr. Cross, are you considering? I'm considering a lot of things. Dylan stood and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where Hazel had chosen to spend her free time instead of pursuing personal pleasures. Tell me more about the computer lab Hazel mentioned. For the next 20 minutes, Sister Margaret detailed the children's home's needs and dreams. Updated educational resources, therapeutic programs, college preparation for aging-out teens, summer camp experiences, arts programs, sports equipment, proper medical and dental care. Each item on the list cost less than what Vivian had spent on jewelry in 2 days. There's something else, Sister Margaret added. Something Hazel probably hasn't mentioned because she's too modest. What's that? She's been taking college courses. Online, at night, paying for them herself. Social work degree with a focus on child development. She wants to eventually work in family services, helping children navigate the system that she survived. Dylan felt something shift in his chest. Hazel wasn't just volunteering here out of kindness. She was preparing to dedicate her professional life to helping children like herself. When does she graduate? Next spring. She's been working toward this for 3 years, while working full-time for you and volunteering here twice a week. 3 jobs. Hazel had essentially been working 3 jobs for 3 years, and Dylan had never noticed her exhaustion or realized her ambition. Footsteps on the stairs announced Hazel's return. She appeared in the doorway, looking slightly tired but peaceful. Tommy's asleep, she said. Sister Margaret, is there anything else you need before I head home? Actually, Sister Margaret smiled, Mr. Cross and I have been having a fascinating conversation about the future of Riverside Haven. Hazel looked between them with curiosity and perhaps a touch of concern. Oh! Dylan turned from the window, meeting her eyes directly. Hazel, why didn't you tell me you were in college? Her cheeks flushed. It didn't seem relevant to my work for you. 3 years of school while working full-time and volunteering here twice a week. That's not irrelevant. That's extraordinary. I'm just trying to prepare for the future I want. Hazel's voice carried quiet determination. These children deserve advocates who understand their experiences, who won't give up on them when things get difficult. And you want to be that advocate. I want to be the person I needed when I was 7 years old and terrified that no one would ever want me to stay. The honesty in her voice hit Dylan like a physical blow. All this time, while he'd been surrounded by people who wanted things from him, Hazel had been quietly building a life dedicated to giving things to others. His phone vibrated insistently in his pocket. Probably another message from one of the 4 women who were spending his money on themselves while Hazel spent it on others. Dylan pulled out his phone and, without looking at the messages, powered it off completely. Hazel, he said, I think we need to have a longer conversation about this experiment. About what I've learned and what it means. Are you disappointed in my choices? The question revealed so much about her fears, about a lifetime of wondering if she was measuring up to other people's expectations. Disappointed. Dylan moved closer, studying her face in the warm light of the children's home. Hazel, you've completely shattered my understanding of human nature. You've shown me what generosity actually looks like, what it means to love people without expecting anything in return. I expected something, she said quietly. What? I expected to feel useful. To feel like my life mattered beyond cleaning someone else's house and making someone else's breakfast. In that moment, Dylan realized that his experiment had revealed something profound about both of them. Hazel wasn't just his employee who'd surprised him with her character. She was a woman who'd spent her entire life building the family she'd never had, creating the safety she'd never known, becoming the person she'd needed when she was alone and afraid. And somehow, in the space of 2 days, she'd shown him what his own life could look like if he chose connection over isolation, generosity over accumulation, genuine relationship over transactional exchange. The revelation was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The children's home had settled into evening quiet, with only the soft sounds of Sister Margaret's office work and the distant hum of the heating system. Dylan found himself in an unexpected situation, sitting in a place that felt more like home than his Beacon Hill penthouse ever had. Would you like to see something? Hazel asked, her voice carrying a tentative quality he'd never heard before. Dylan nodded, following her down a hallway lined with children's artwork and achievement certificates. She stopped at a bulletin board covered with photographs, letters, and newspaper clippings. This is our alumni wall, she explained. Children who've lived here and moved on to better situations. Dylan studied the images. Graduation photos, wedding pictures, military ceremonies, college acceptance letters. Each photo had a small placard with dates and brief updates. Marcus Jen, adopted 2022, honor roll student at Cambridge Ringe Latin School, Dylan read aloud. The angry boy Sister Margaret told you about. Hazel's smile was warm with pride. He writes every month. Wants to be a teacher. And this one. Dylan pointed to a photo of a young woman in a nursing uniform. Jessica. She aged out of foster care at 18 with nowhere to go. Sister Margaret helped her get into a community college program. She graduated last spring as a certified nursing assistant. Dylan continued scanning the wall, seeing success after success. Children who'd been written off by society, given another chance through the consistency and care of people like Sister Margaret and Hazel. Look at this. Hazel pulled a folded letter from her pocket. Came yesterday from Tommy's social worker. There's a family in Newton who's interested in adopting him. That's wonderful news. It is. Hazel's expression mixed joy with something more complex. It's also terrifying for him. He's been here 2 years. This is the only stability he's known since his birth parents died. Dylan watched her carefully fold the letter, noting the tenderness in her movements. How do you help him through something like that? Patience. Honesty. Letting him know that being chosen by a family doesn't mean he has to forget the people who cared for him here. Hazel looked up at the alumni wall. We teach them that love multiplies, it doesn't replace. The concept hit Dylan with unexpected force. Love multiplies, it doesn't replace. In his world, relationships felt zero-sum. Attention given to one person meant less available for others. Resources shared meant personal loss. But here was a different model entirely. Hazel, Dylan said slowly, can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I might not answer. Her honesty made him smile. When you started working for me, did you expect it to be permanent? Hazel considered the question. I hoped it would be stable. That's different than permanent. How so? Permanent implies that both people want the situation to continue indefinitely. Stable just means it won't change suddenly without warning. She gestured toward the alumni wall. These children taught me the difference. They don't need permanent placement as much as they need stable care while they're here. Dylan realized he'd never thought about employment from an employee's perspective. To him, Hazel's position was just a role to be filled. To her, it was economic security that allowed her to pursue education and volunteer work. Are you happy working for me? The question surprised him with its vulnerability. Hazel turned to study his face. Are you asking as my employer or as someone trying to understand me better? The second one. Then yes, I'm happy. You're fair, you don't make unreasonable demands, and you pay me well enough to afford college and help out here when I can. She paused. Are you happy employing me? The question turned his own inquiry back on himself. Was he happy? I was satisfied with the arrangement. But I'm realizing satisfaction and happiness aren't the same thing. What would make you happy? Dylan looked around the children's home, thinking about the peace he'd felt during dinner, the laughter that had come so naturally during Tommy's storytelling. I'm starting to think I've been asking the wrong questions about everything. Such as, like asking what people want from me instead of asking what I want to give. Or asking how to protect myself from being used instead of asking how to be useful. Hazel's green eyes softened with understanding. Those are harder questions. Much harder. They stood in comfortable silence, both looking at the wall of successful outcomes. Dylan thought about his own achievements, mounted in corporate offices and featured in financial magazines. Mergers, acquisitions, profit margins. Important work, but work that measured success in numbers rather than transformed lives. Dylan, Hazel said quietly, can I tell you something that might change how you think about your experiment? What do you mean? You've been treating the credit card like a test of my character. But for me, it was something else entirely. What was it? Hazel moved to a nearby window, looking out at the neighborhood where streetlights cast pools of warmth in the November darkness. It was the first time in my adult life that someone trusted me with real power and didn't monitor every decision I made. Dylan felt something cold settle in his stomach. I was monitoring. I was tracking every purchase. But you didn't stop me. You didn't question my choices or demand explanations. You gave me freedom and trusted that I wouldn't abuse it. The distinction hit him like a revelation. He'd been focused on what Hazel chose to buy, but she'd been experiencing what it felt like to be trusted completely. That's why you spent the money here, he said, understanding dawning. Partly. But also because unlimited resources let me do what I'd always wanted to do but couldn't afford. Hazel turned back to face him. Do you know what it's like to see children who need things you can't provide? To watch teenagers age out of the system without life skills or support because there's no money for proper programs. Dylan shook his head. It's heartbreaking. Every week for 3 years, I've come here wanting to do more, knowing that my $20 for craft supplies or my homemade cookies for movie night were drops in an ocean of need. And then I gave you an ocean. You gave me the ability to love these children the way I'd always wanted to. Completely, without financial limitations holding me back. Dylan thought about his own relationships, all carefully bounded by unspoken contracts and mutual benefit. When was the last time he'd loved anyone completely, without calculation or reservation? His phone had been silent for an hour, but Dylan could imagine the messages accumulating. Vivian, angry about his rejection of her art purchases. Candace, confused by his sudden unavailability. Brooke, planning investment strategies for money that wasn't hers. Felicity, orchestrating charity events that would benefit her more than any actual cause. All of them performing affection to gain access to his resources. While Hazel had taken his resources and given them away to children who had nothing to offer in return except gratitude and love. "There's something else," Hazel said, her voice carrying nervous energy. "Something I need to tell you about tomorrow." "What about tomorrow?" "I requested the day off 3 weeks ago. It's adoption day for Katie." She gestured toward a photo on the alumni wall showing a shy-looking girl with dark curls. "She's been here 18 months. And a family in Brookline is finalizing her adoption tomorrow." Dylan looked at the photo, seeing a child who bore a strong resemblance to a younger version of Hazel. "She's special to you. She reminds me of myself at that age. Scared, trying to be perfect, afraid that any mistake might make people change their minds about wanting her. And you want to be there for the transition." I promised her I would be. Adoption days are wonderful but terrifying for children. Even when they want the placement desperately, leaving the familiar for the unknown is frightening. Dylan studied Hazel's profile as she looked at Katie's photo. The tenderness in her expression, the protective love of someone who understood exactly what that little girl was feeling. "Hazel, would you mind if I came with you?" She turned in surprise. "To the adoption ceremony?" "If it wouldn't be intrusive. I'd like to understand more about what you do here. How these transitions work." "It's not glamorous. A lot of paperwork, some tears, careful introductions. Katie's been having visits with her new family for months, but tomorrow makes it official. I'd still like to be there, if you think it would be appropriate." Hazel searched his face for several long moments. "Why?" Dylan considered various diplomatic answers before settling on truth. "Because I'm starting to realize that I've spent years focusing on business transactions while you've been part of something that actually matters. I want to understand what that looks like. It might change how you see me. As your employee, I mean." "How so?" "You might realize that my real work isn't cleaning your house or making your breakfast. My real work is this." She gestured around the children's home. "Everything else is just how I fund what matters to me." The honesty was breathtaking. Dylan had assumed he was Hazel's primary employer, the center of her professional universe. Instead, he was discovering that he'd been funding her real passion without even knowing it. "Hazel, can I ask you something else?" "Yes." "When you graduate next spring, are you planning to leave your position with me?" She met his eyes directly. "I was planning to give you 6 months' notice so you could find a replacement. My degree will qualify me for entry-level positions in family services, but they don't pay well initially. I'd need time to make the transition financially responsible." 6 months' notice. While other people in his life calculated how to extract maximum benefit from their relationships with him, Hazel was planning how to leave responsibly, ensuring he wouldn't be inconvenienced by her departure. What if there was another option? Dylan heard himself say. What kind of option? Dylan looked around the children's home, thinking about Sister Margaret's wish list, about the alumni wall full of success stories, about Tommy's potential adoption and Katie's new beginning. An idea was forming, something that felt both impulsive and inevitable. What if we could create a position that would let you work with children professionally while maintaining financial stability? Hazel's expression grew cautious. Dylan, I appreciate the thought, but I don't want charity. I want to earn my way into this field. Not charity. Partnership. What do you mean? Dylan moved closer, his mind racing with possibilities. What if Cross Financial established a foundation focused on children's services? Professional staff, real resources, the ability to make systematic change instead of just helping one facility at a time. Hazel stared at him. You're serious. I'm serious. You'd have a real salary, benefits, the authority to develop programs and allocate resources. You'd be doing exactly what you want to do, but with the backing to make a much larger impact. Why would you do that? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither of them was quite ready to name. Dylan could offer several answers. Tax benefits, corporate social responsibility, public relations advantages. Instead, he told her the truth. Because watching you work today showed me what I've been missing. You've found a way to make your life matter beyond yourself. I want to learn how to do that. And you think funding a foundation would teach you that? I think working with you would teach me that. The words created a charged silence between them. Dylan realized he'd just proposed something that would fundamentally change their relationship, moving them from employer-employee to partners in something meaningful. I need to think about it, Hazel said finally. Of course. And I need to know that you're not offering this because you feel guilty about the experiment, or because you're trying to keep me from leaving. Dylan nodded. Fair questions. Can I answer them tomorrow, after I've seen more of your real work? All right. They stood facing each other in the hallway of the children's home, surrounded by evidence of transformed lives and second chances. Dylan felt something shifting in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since his parents' death, he was contemplating a future built around connection rather than protection, generosity rather than accumulation. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely dependent on the woman standing before him, whose quiet strength had already begun transforming everything he thought he knew about love, work, and what it meant to build a meaningful life. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, new challenges, and new opportunities to discover whether two very different people could create something beautiful together. Sometimes the most profound changes come not from dramatic events, but from witnessing someone else's quiet courage in living authentically. The Suffolk County Family Court building buzzed with the controlled chaos of a Tuesday morning. Dylan sat in the waiting area beside Hazel, watching her smooth Katie's adoption paperwork for the third time in 10 minutes. Her nervous energy was palpable, transmitted through small gestures like adjusting her navy blazer and checking her watch. She'll be fine, Dylan said quietly. I know. It's just. Hazel's voice trailed off as she watched Katie emerge from a conference room with her new parents, the Hendersons. The 8-year-old's face showed a mixture of excitement and terror that Dylan was learning to recognize in children facing major life transitions. Miss Hazel. Katie broke free from her new family and ran to Hazel's arms. They said I can decorate my own room, and we're getting a puppy, and Mrs. Henderson knows how to braid hair like you showed me. Hazel hugged the little girl tightly, her eyes bright with unshed tears. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Are you ready for this big adventure? I think so. But what if I forget how to find you? You won't forget. And I'll never be far away. Hazel pulled a small wrapped package from her purse. This is for your new room. Katie tore open the paper to reveal a framed photo of her with Hazel and the other children at Riverside Haven, taken during yesterday's carnival party. In the picture, Katie was mid-laugh, chocolate smeared on her cheek, looking completely carefree. So you'll always remember where you came from and how loved you were, Hazel said softly. Dylan watched the interaction with growing understanding of what Hazel had meant about love multiplying rather than replacing. Katie's joy at her new family didn't diminish her affection for Hazel. Instead, both relationships seemed to strengthen each other. The formal adoption ceremony took 30 minutes. Dylan observed from the back of the courtroom as Katie officially became Catherine Henderson, surrounded by social workers, court officials, and her beaming new parents. Hazel sat in the front row, radiating quiet pride and carefully controlled emotion. When the judge declared the adoption finalized, the courtroom erupted in gentle applause. Katie ran to Hazel first, then to her new parents, seamlessly bridging her old world and her new one. That was beautiful, Dylan said as they walked from the courthouse into the crisp November air. It never gets easier, Hazel replied, wiping tears she'd held back during the ceremony. Happy tears, but still tears. Dylan's phone, which he'd kept silent during the proceedings, vibrated insistently. He glanced at the screen to see 17 missed calls and 43 unread messages. Popular morning? Hazel asked, noticing his expression. Apparently. Dylan scrolled through the notifications, seeing Vivian's name repeatedly, along with several calls from Brooke and 2 voicemails from Felicity. I should probably handle whatever emergency they've created in your absence, Hazel finished. I understand. Thank you for coming today. It meant a lot to have you there. Where are you going now? Back to Riverside Haven. Sister Margaret is expecting me, and I want to help Tommy process Katie's adoption. He's next on the list for potential placement, and seeing her leave is bringing up his own anxieties. Dylan nodded, but something felt unfinished between them. The previous evening's conversation about the foundation, about partnership, about changing the fundamental nature of their relationship, hung in the air like an unresolved chord. Hazel, about what we discussed last night. I've been thinking about it. She adjusted her purse strap, a gesture Dylan was learning meant she was choosing her words carefully. It's a generous offer, Dylan. More generous than I probably deserve. You deserve more than I could possibly offer. But I need to know that it's real. That you're not offering me a dream job because you feel guilty about treating me like a test subject. The honesty in her voice hit him like a physical blow. Is that what you think this is? I think you're a good man who's discovered that someone in his life has been struggling, and your first instinct is to fix it with money. That's not. Dylan started, then stopped. Was that what he was doing? Trying to solve complex emotional realities with financial solutions? I need to get back, Hazel said. Tommy's waiting. She turned toward the subway entrance, leaving Dylan standing on the courthouse steps with his phone full of demanding messages and a growing sense that he'd somehow mishandled something important. Dylan's office felt smaller than usual when he returned, despite its panoramic views of Boston Harbor. His assistant's desk was empty, Brooke having left a note that she was handling the situation and would return shortly. What situation? Dylan's question was answered when his office door burst open without a knock. Vivian Sterling swept in like an avenging angel, her platinum hair perfectly styled despite her obvious agitation. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent and carried herself with the entitled fury of someone unaccustomed to being ignored. Dylan Cross, I have been trying to reach you for 18 hours. Good morning to you too, Vivian. Don't you dare take that tone with me. She slammed her designer handbag on his desk. Do you have any idea what you've put me through? Dylan settled into his chair, noting that Vivian's anger made her even more beautiful in a dangerous, unpredictable way. Enlighten me. The gallery called yesterday evening. Apparently, my credit card was declined when I tried to complete the art purchase. Declined. Dylan, do you know how humiliating that was? Dylan remembered canceling Vivian's card access after leaving the children's home, but the timing felt like a lifetime ago. The experimental week is over. Experimental week. Vivian's voice rose an octave. You were experimenting on me? I was curious about human nature when financial constraints are removed. Human nature? Vivian's laugh held no humor. You gave me unlimited spending power just to see what I'd do with it? Among other things, yes. Vivian stared at him for a long moment, her gray eyes calculating. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Well, that's actually rather clever. Very you, darling. Always thinking 3 steps ahead. The shift in her demeanor was so sudden it gave Dylan whiplash. Vivian. I assume I passed your little test? I mean, $45,000 for investment quality art is hardly frivolous spending. I was thinking about our future, about pieces that would appreciate in value. Our future. Dylan studied Vivian's face, seeing the familiar performance of someone telling him what she thought he wanted to hear. Even now, knowing she'd been tested, she was recalibrating her approach to maintain access to his resources. The test is over, he said simply. Good. Then we can move forward. Vivian moved around his desk, perching on the edge with practiced grace. I've been thinking about us, Dylan. About what we could build together. Before Dylan could respond, his office door opened again. Brooke entered with Candace Rivers in tow, both women looking like they'd coordinated their entrance for maximum impact. Dylan, thank God, Candace said, rushing toward him in a swirl of red fabric and expensive perfume. Brooke told me about Vivian's little tantrum. I came as soon as I could. My tantrum. Vivian's voice carried lethal sweetness. How interesting that you're here, Candace. Shouldn't you be at your spa retreat? I cut it short when I realized Dylan needed support. Candace positioned herself on Dylan's other side, creating a triangle of beautiful, demanding women around his desk. Support for what, exactly? Brooke asked, her strawberry blonde hair gleaming under the office lights. The situation seems perfectly manageable. Dylan looked between the three women, understanding dawning like cold water. You've all been talking to each other. We've been comparing notes, Vivian confirmed. Imagine our surprise when we discovered we'd all received identical credit cards on the same day. And identical treatment when they were suddenly canceled, Candace added. Without explanation or warning, Brooke finished. The coordinated accusation felt rehearsed, like a prosecution strategy designed to corner him. Dylan realized that while he'd been learning about Hazel's character, these three women had been learning about his experiment and forming an alliance against him. So we're here to clear the air, Vivian continued. To understand what your little game was really about and to discuss how we move forward. There is no we, Dylan said quietly. Excuse me. Candace's smile faltered. There is no moving forward. The experiment is over, and so are our relationships. The silence that followed was deafening. Three beautiful faces stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to anger to calculation. Dylan, Vivian said carefully, I think you're upset about something. Perhaps we should discuss this when you're feeling more rational. I'm perfectly rational. No, you're not. Brooke's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to managing his schedule and decisions. You've been acting erratically for days. Missing appointments, ignoring calls, making impulsive decisions. This is about the housekeeper, isn't it? Candace's voice dripped with disdain. Brooke told us about your sudden interest in children's charities. How philanthropic of you. Dylan felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. What did you say? The housekeeper, Vivian repeated. What's her name? Hazel something. Brooke mentioned that she was part of your experiment too. Dylan turned to Brooke, who had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. You've been discussing Hazel? I was concerned about your judgment, Brooke said defensively. Giving unlimited credit access to household staff seemed unwise. So you investigated her. I protected your interests. That's what you pay me to do. Dylan's hands clenched into fists. What did you find? Brooke glanced at Vivian and Candace before answering. Nothing criminal, if that's what you're worried about. But her spending patterns were interesting. How so? She spent everything at that children's home in Roxbury. Every penny went to a place that's already under investigation by the state for financial irregularities. The words hit Dylan like physical blows. What investigation? Apparently, there have been questions about missing funds from their education budget. Small amounts, but consistent over several months. Brooke's voice carried false sympathy. I'm sure she didn't know, but it does raise questions about her judgment. Dylan's mind raced. Missing funds. Financial irregularities. Hazel's passionate defense of the children's home suddenly looked different through this lens. When did this investigation begin? He asked. 3 weeks ago, Brooke answered. Right around the time your housekeeper started her current volunteer schedule there. 3 weeks. The timing created an ugly picture that Dylan didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. Of course, we're not suggesting she's involved, Vivian added with false generosity. But association with a facility under investigation could reflect poorly on you. On all of us. Especially if reporters start asking questions about why Cross Financial's owner is suddenly funding potentially corrupt children's services, Candace continued. Dylan looked at the three women surrounding him, seeing calculation masked as concern. They'd done their research, crafted their narrative, and presented their case with prosecutorial precision. And the terrible thing was, their concerns weren't entirely unreasonable. What do you suggest? He heard himself ask. Distance yourself from the situation, Brooke advised. Quietly. Let the investigation run its course before making any major charitable commitments. And personally? Vivian's voice was gentle, understanding. Perhaps consider whether someone with such poor judgment about financial matters is the right person to handle your household affairs. The suggestion hung in the air like poison. Fire Hazel. Cut ties with Riverside Haven. Return to the safe, controlled world of relationships based on mutual benefit rather than emotional risk. Dylan's phone vibrated with a text message. Hazel's name appeared on the screen. Tommy's placement interview went well today. Thank you again for being there for Katie's adoption. It meant everything to her and to me. See you tomorrow morning. The simple message, with its genuine gratitude and casual assumption of continuity, contrasted sharply with the calculated performance surrounding his desk. Dylan, Vivian said softly, we care about you. That's why we're here. To protect you from making decisions you might regret. We understand you were lonely, Candace added. That you were looking for something real. But you have to be careful about confusing gratitude with affection. The housekeeper sees you as a benefactor, Brooke explained. Someone who can fund her dreams. Is that really the foundation you want for a relationship? Their words created doubt where certainty had been growing. Had Hazel been performing too, just more subtly? Was her reaction to the foundation offered genuine humility or calculated strategy? Dylan looked out at Boston Harbor, where ships moved between destinations with mechanical precision. Safe, predictable, efficient. Unlike human relationships, which were messy and complicated and full of potential for both profound connection and devastating betrayal. I need time to think, he said finally. Of course, Vivian agreed. But don't take too long. Situations like this have a way of becoming more complicated the longer they're left unresolved. As the three women left his office, Dylan found himself alone with his doubts and the growing suspicion that he'd been played by everyone in his life, including the one person he'd thought was different. The foundation idea suddenly seemed naive, impulsive, the fantasy of a lonely man desperate to believe in authentic human connection. By evening, Dylan had convinced himself that Brooke's investigation had saved him from making a terrible mistake. He had no way of knowing that 3 floors below, in the building's parking garage, Vivian, Candace, and Brooke were celebrating the success of their carefully orchestrated plan to destroy his faith in the one person who actually loved him. The truth was about to become much more complicated than any of them had anticipated. Sometimes the most dangerous advice comes from those who benefit from keeping us isolated and dependent on their version of reality. Dylan stood in his kitchen at 6:30 in the morning, staring at the coffee maker as if it held answers to questions he wasn't sure how to ask. The silence felt wrong. For 3 years, this time of day had been filled with Hazel's quiet humming, the sounds of breakfast preparation, the comfortable routine of someone who cared about his well-being. Today, nothing. He'd sent her a text the night before, take a few days off. Personal matters to handle. We'll be in touch soon. Her response had been immediate. Of course. Is everything all right? He hadn't answered. Now, 12 hours later, Dylan was discovering what his life looked like without Hazel's steady presence. Cold coffee, stale bagels from the freezer, and a hollow feeling that had nothing to do with hunger. His phone rang. Jake's number. Morning, boss. You wanted me to dig deeper into that children's home situation. Dylan had called Jake the previous evening, asking him to investigate Brooke's claims about financial irregularities at Riverside Haven. If he was going to destroy Hazel's reputation and his own chance at something real, he wanted to be absolutely certain of his facts. What did you find? That's the thing. I can't find any investigation. No state records, no complaints filed, no regulatory actions pending. Dylan felt something cold settle in his stomach. What do you mean? I mean, Brooke's story doesn't check out. I called the Department of Children and Families, the state auditor's office, even the local police. Nobody knows anything about financial irregularities at Riverside Haven. Maybe it's not public yet? Boss, I've got contacts in every relevant agency. If there was an investigation, even a preliminary one, someone would know about it. Dylan sank into a kitchen chair, his mind racing. Jake, I need you to do something else. Name it. Look into Vivian, Candace, and Brooke. Financial records, recent communications, anything that might explain why they coordinated their stories yesterday. You think they're lying? I think I've been an idiot. Dylan arrived at his office to find Brooke already at her desk, looking perfectly composed in a navy suit and pearls. Her strawberry blonde hair was styled in a professional chignon, and she greeted him with the same efficient smile she'd worn for 18 months. Good morning, Dylan. How are you feeling today? Like I've been lied to. Brooke's smile faltered slightly. I'm sorry. The investigation into Riverside Haven. Jake looked into it. There is no investigation. For just a moment, something flickered across Brooke's face. Fear, maybe, or calculation. Then her professional mask snapped back into place. That's impossible. I have documentation. Show me. Brooke's fingers hesitated over her keyboard. The files are confidential. I can't just. You can and you will. Right now. The authority in Dylan's voice cut through whatever script Brooke had prepared. She opened several files on her computer, clicking through documents with increasing desperation. I don't understand. The information was here yesterday. Dylan moved behind her desk, studying the screen. The documents she was opening were clearly fabricated, and recently so. File creation dates from 2 days ago, generic formatting, no official letterheads or case numbers. Brooke, I'm going to ask you once. What the hell is going on? The question hung in the air like a sword. Brooke's shoulders sagged as her careful composure finally cracked. It wasn't supposed to go this far, she said quietly. What wasn't? The whole thing. The investigation story, the coordination with Vivian and Candace. We were protecting our interests. Your interests? Brooke turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears that Dylan suspected were as calculated as everything else about her. Dylan, you have to understand. You've been different since the experiment started. Distant, distracted, making decisions that don't make sense. Like what? Like considering a foundation run by someone with no professional experience. Like spending time at children's homes instead of focusing on business. Like letting a housekeeper influence major financial decisions. Dylan felt anger building in his chest like a slow fire. So you decided to intervene. We decided to help you see clearly. Brooke's voice gained strength as she committed to her narrative. Vivian loves you, Dylan. She's sophisticated, connected, the kind of partner who could enhance your social and business standing. Candace is ambitious and beautiful, someone who shares your drive for success. And you. I understand your business better than anyone. I know your goals, your methods, your long-term vision. Together, we could build something extraordinary. Dylan stared at her, seeing the calculated ambition beneath her tears. And Hazel. Hazel is lovely, I'm sure. But she's also a housekeeper from a difficult background who's never operated in your world. She doesn't understand the pressures you face, the decisions you have to make. She understands more than you think. Does she? Or does she understand how to make you feel needed while pursuing her own agenda? The question hit its intended target. Dylan had wondered the same thing, lying awake the previous night, replaying every conversation with Hazel for signs of manipulation. The foundation idea came from you, not her, Brooke continued. She was smart enough to seem reluctant, to make you convince her. Classic strategy. Strategy. Dylan, you're brilliant in business, but you can be naive about personal relationships. Hazel saw an opportunity and took it. Can you really blame her? Dylan thought about Hazel's reaction to his foundation proposal. Her immediate concern that it might be charity rather than partnership. Her insistence that she needed to earn her way into the field. Her request for time to consider whether his motives were genuine. Had that been manipulation? Or had it been the response of someone who'd spent her life being careful about accepting help, knowing that it often came with strings attached? I want to see the real documentation, Dylan said. What documentation? Whatever you actually have on Hazel and Riverside Haven. No more lies, Brooke. I want the truth. Brooke hesitated, then opened a different folder. This one contained legitimate research, Hazel's employment history, her college transcripts, her volunteer schedule at the children's home. But also photos taken without permission, detailed financial analysis of her spending patterns, and what looked like surveillance reports. Jesus Christ, Brooke. You had her followed. We had to protect you. She could have been anyone, could have had any agenda. Dylan scrolled through the documents, feeling sick. Photos of Hazel at the grocery store, at the children's home, walking to class. Reports on her daily routine, her financial transactions, her interactions with others. And at the bottom of the file, a detailed analysis of how to discredit her if necessary. This is insane. This is thorough. And look what we found. Brooke pointed to a financial summary. She's been struggling to pay for college, working multiple jobs just to cover basic expenses. Do you think it's a coincidence that she became so devoted to you right when her financial situation became desperate? The implication was clear and ugly. Dylan stared at the numbers, seeing Hazel's life reduced to financial data points that painted a picture of someone who might use relationships for economic survival. But the same data also showed something else. Consistent volunteer work despite financial stress, small charitable contributions from her limited income, a pattern of putting others' needs before her own financial security. There's another interpretation of this data, Dylan said slowly. Which is that she's exactly who she appears to be. Someone who helps others even when she can barely help herself. Brooke's expression hardened. Dylan, you're being willfully naive. And you're being willfully vindictive. I'm being realistic about human nature. Dylan closed the file and stood. Clean out your desk. You're fired. You can't fire me for protecting your interests. I can fire you for fabricating evidence, invading someone's privacy, and manipulating me with false information. Brooke's mask finally fell completely, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Fine. But don't come crying to me when your housekeeper breaks your heart and disappears with half your fortune. She could have done that already, Brooke. I gave her unlimited access for a week, and she spent $300 on hot dogs for orphan children. This time. What about next time? The question followed Dylan as he left his office, walking toward his car with a growing sense of urgency. Next time. What about next time? Dylan found Hazel in the children's home library, reading to a group of preschoolers who were sprawled on colorful rugs around her feet. She wore jeans and a soft green sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking more relaxed than he'd seen her in his formal penthouse environment. She looked up when he entered, surprise and concern flickering across her face. Dylan, what are you doing here? We need to talk. Hazel glanced at the children, then at Sister Margaret, who appeared from behind a bookshelf. I can finish story time, the older woman said, understanding the gravity in Dylan's voice. Take all the time you need. Dylan and Hazel walked to the same hallway where they'd talked 2 nights earlier, but everything felt different now. The warm connection that had been building between them was overshadowed by doubt, suspicion, and the ugly residue of other people's manipulation. Dylan, what's wrong? You look terrible. Do you love me? The question emerged without preamble, raw and desperate. Hazel stared at him for several long moments. That's a complicated question. It's actually very simple. No, it's not. Hazel leaned against the wall, studying his face. Are you asking if I love you as my employer? As a friend? As someone I'm grateful to? Or are you asking something else entirely? I'm asking if any of this is real. If you're real. Understanding dawned in Hazel's green eyes. Someone's been talking to you. Telling you things about me, about my motives. Are they wrong? That depends on what they said. Dylan pulled out his phone, showing her some of the surveillance photos Brooke had collected. Hazel's face went pale as she scrolled through images of herself going about her daily life, unaware she was being watched. They had you followed. They investigated your finances, your background, your relationship with this place. Who's they? Vivian, Candace, Brooke. They presented a very compelling case that you've been manipulating me for financial gain. Hazel handed back his phone, her expression unreadable. And you believed them. I don't know what to believe. Yes, you do. Hazel's voice was quiet but firm. You know exactly what to believe. The question is whether you have the courage to trust your own judgment or whether you're going to let other people's fears become your reality. Hazel. Dylan, I could tell you that I love you. I could explain every financial decision I've made, justify every moment I've spent with you, prove that my feelings are genuine. But if you need that proof, if you can't see the truth in how I've lived my life for the past 3 years, then maybe those women are right about us. The honesty in her voice was devastating. No tears, no dramatic protests of innocence, just clear-eyed assessment of their situation. Maybe we're from different worlds that can't be bridged, she continued. Maybe I am naive about the complexities of your life, and maybe you're naive about the realities of mine. What are you saying? I'm saying that love requires trust, and trust can't be built on surveillance reports and financial analysis. Either you believe in who I am, or you don't. Dylan looked into her eyes, seeing the pain she was trying to hide behind practical acceptance. This was the moment, the choice that would determine not just their relationship, but the kind of man he was going to be. He could choose safety, returning to the controlled world of transactional relationships where everything was spelled out in contracts and nobody could surprise him. Or he could choose trust, accepting that real love required vulnerability and that vulnerability always carried the risk of being hurt. Hazel, he said finally, I'm sorry. For what? For doubting you. For letting other people's poison infect something beautiful. For not trusting my own experience of who you are. Tears appeared in Hazel's eyes for the first time. Dylan. I love you, he said, the words feeling both terrifying and inevitable. Not because you're convenient or grateful or easy to control. I love you because you've shown me what it means to live authentically, to care about something beyond yourself, to build relationships based on genuine affection rather than mutual benefit. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Hazel stepped closer, reaching up to touch his face with trembling fingers. I love you too. I have for months, maybe since the day you asked me if I was all right because I looked tired. Nobody ever asked me that before. Dylan pulled her into his arms, feeling pieces of himself clicking into place. This was real. This mattered. This was worth fighting for. What happens now? Hazel asked against his chest. Now we go build something beautiful together. Starting with that foundation. You're serious about that? I'm serious about everything when it comes to you. But even as they held each other in the hallway of the children's home, Dylan knew their troubles weren't over. Vivian, Candace, and Brooke wouldn't accept his choice quietly. There would be consequences, retaliation, attempts to destroy what he and Hazel were building. The real test was just beginning. Sometimes the most important choice you make is deciding who to trust when everyone around you is offering advice. The call came at 7 in the morning, 1 week after Dylan had fired Brooke and chosen love over suspicion. Jake's voice carried grim urgency. Boss, you need to see today's paper. Page 3. Dylan grabbed his laptop, pulling up the Boston Globe online. The headline made his blood run cold. Billionaire's charity scandal. Cross financial owner funds questionable children's home through personal relationship. The article was devastating in its implications. Anonymous sources claimed Dylan had established an inappropriate relationship with an employee, using charitable donations to a children's home as a cover for personal favors. Photos accompanied the story. Dylan and Hazel at Katie's adoption ceremony, walking together outside Riverside Haven, embracing in the courthouse hallway. The pictures had been taken without their knowledge, cropped to suggest intimacy rather than showing the full context of their interactions. According to financial records obtained by this reporter, the article continued, Cross has funneled over $200,000 to Riverside Haven Children's Home in the past week, coinciding with his romantic involvement with Hazel Porter, a volunteer at the facility and employee in Cross's household. Dylan's hands shook as he read further. The story painted him as a predatory employer taking advantage of a financially vulnerable woman, and Hazel as someone who had manipulated her way into his affections for monetary gain. Every beautiful moment of their developing relationship was twisted into something ugly and transactional. His phone rang immediately. Hazel's number. "Dylan, I just saw." Her voice was thick with tears. "I'm coming to get you. Don't talk to any reporters. Don't go anywhere alone. They're already here. There are news vans outside my apartment." Dylan's jaw clenched. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Dylan's Mercedes felt conspicuous in Hazel's working-class neighborhood, especially with 3 news vans parked on the street and reporters clustering around her building like vultures. He called her from his car. "Back door," she said. "Through the alley." Dylan found her waiting by the rear entrance, wearing jeans and a heavy coat, her face pale but determined. She slipped into his car quickly, sliding down in the passenger seat to avoid the cameras. "How did they get those photos?" she asked as they drove away. "Brooke had you followed, remember? She must have kept copies of everything. But why now? Why a week later?" Dylan thought about the timing, about the coordinated nature of the attack. Because they needed time to plan, to make sure the story would cause maximum damage. They drove in silence for several minutes, both processing the implications of public scrutiny and media attention. Dylan's phone vibrated constantly with calls from reporters, business associates, and board members demanding explanations. "Dylan," Hazel said quietly, "maybe we should step back from each other. Until this blows over." "Absolutely not. The story makes you look terrible. It could damage your business, your reputation." "I don't care about my reputation. You should care. You've built something important, and I won't be the reason it gets destroyed." Dylan pulled into the parking garage of his building, grateful for the privacy it offered. He turned to face Hazel directly. "Listen to me carefully. I have spent my entire adult life making decisions based on what other people thought, what looked good professionally, what protected my image. And you know what that got me? A lonely, hollow existence surrounded by people who only cared about what I could give them." "Dylan, I'm not finished. You've shown me what it means to live authentically, to care about something beyond myself, to build relationships based on love rather than transaction. If I back away from you now because some newspaper wants to create scandal, then I'm exactly the shallow, money-obsessed person they're painting me as." Hazel's eyes filled with tears. "But what if they're right? What if I am just a housekeeper who got in over her head? What if this whole thing is a mistake? Do you love me? Yes. Do I love you? I think so. Then nothing else matters. Not the newspapers, not the gossip, not what anyone else thinks about us." Dylan took her hands, feeling their warmth despite the cold November morning. "Hazel, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." "Okay. Will you marry me?" The question hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Hazel stared at him with wide eyes. "Are you serious?" "I've never been more serious about anything. Dylan, we've known each other romantically for less than a week. People will say you're acting irrationally, that you're making decisions based on scandal rather than sense. People will say a lot of things. What do you say?" Hazel was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. "I say yes. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Not because of your money or your status or what you can give me, but because you see me for who I really am, and somehow you love that person." Dylan pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion and certainty he'd been holding back. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We're really doing this," Hazel said, half laughing, half crying. "We're really doing this." Dylan's board meeting was already in progress when he arrived, having spent the morning helping Hazel pack a bag and move temporarily into his penthouse until the media attention died down. 12 stern faces turned toward him as he entered the conference room. "Dylan," Board Chairman Robert Hayes began without preamble, "we need to discuss damage control." "There's nothing to control. The article in this morning's Globe suggests otherwise. Questions are being raised about your judgment, your business practices, your personal conduct." Dylan took his seat at the head of the table, looking around at men and women who'd been his advisors for years. Good people, mostly, but people who understood success in terms of quarterly profits and public perception. "Let me be clear about something," Dylan said. "I am in love with Hazel Porter. I plan to marry her. I have donated money to Riverside Haven Children's Home because it does important work helping vulnerable children. None of these facts constitute a scandal. But the appearance." Board member Patricia Kendall began. "The appearance is being manufactured by people with their own agendas. People who want to destroy my personal happiness because it threatens their access to my resources." Dylan stood, walking to the window that overlooked Boston Harbor. "I've spent 15 years building this company, generating returns for shareholders, creating jobs, contributing to the economy. My personal life has never interfered with my professional obligations." "Until now," Robert said quietly. "How so?" "Dylan, you've been distracted for weeks. Missing meetings, making impulsive decisions, proposing charitable foundations without proper board consultation. I proposed establishing a foundation to help children in need. If the board finds that problematic, perhaps I'm working with the wrong board." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Dylan realized he was at another crossroads, another moment of choice between safety and authenticity. "I want to read you something," he said, pulling out his phone. "This is from Marcus Chen, age 16, currently a junior at Cambridge Ringe Latin School." Dylan began reading a letter he'd received that morning. "Mr. Cross, I heard about the mean things people are saying about you and Miss Hazel in the newspaper. I wanted you to know that Miss Hazel saved my life. When I came to Riverside Haven, I was angry and scared and didn't trust anyone. Miss Hazel never tried to fix me or change me. She just showed up every week and treated me like I mattered. Because of her, I learned how to trust adults again. Because of her, I'm going to college next year. The newspaper people don't know Miss Hazel like we do. She's not trying to get anything from anybody. She just loves people who need love. If you marry her, you'll be the luckiest man in the world. From your friend, Marcus." Dylan folded his phone, looking around the table at 12 faces that showed varying degrees of understanding. "That letter is worth more to me than any quarterly earnings report," he said. "If this board cannot support my commitment to using our resources to help vulnerable children, and my personal choice to marry a woman of extraordinary character, then perhaps it's time for me to step back from active leadership." "Dylan," Patricia said carefully, "no one is questioning Miss Porter's character or your charitable impulses. We're simply concerned about the optics, the potential impact on business relationships." "Then let me make this simple for everyone." Dylan returned to his seat, his decision crystallizing as he spoke. "I am establishing the Cross Foundation for Children's Services with an initial endowment of $50 million. Hazel Porter will serve as executive director once she completes her degree next spring. The foundation will operate independently but with full transparency regarding its activities and funding." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. "Furthermore," Dylan continued, "Hazel and I will be married on December 15th at Riverside Haven Children's Home, with the ceremony open to media coverage. Anyone who wants to see what our relationship actually looks like is welcome to attend." "Dylan," Robert said, "are you sure about this approach? Wouldn't a private ceremony be more appropriate given the current scrutiny?" "Robert, I'm tired of living my life according to what's appropriate. I'm choosing what's authentic instead." The children's home had been transformed into a winter wonderland. White lights twinkled from every surface, red and gold ribbons adorned the railings, and fresh evergreen garlands filled the air with the scent of Christmas. The main room had been cleared for the ceremony, with rows of folding chairs facing a simple altar decorated with white flowers. Dylan stood at the front of the room in a classic black tuxedo, watching the door for his bride. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of media attention, business meetings, and wedding planning, but also of growing certainty that he was making the right choice. The Boston Globe had eventually printed a retraction and apology after Dylan's legal team proved that the anonymous sources were Vivian, Candace, and Brooke acting in coordination. The 3 women had disappeared from his life as quickly as they'd tried to destroy it, moving on to other targets and other schemes. Jake stood beside him as best man, grinning broadly. "You ready for this, boss?" "I've never been more ready for anything." The music began, played by a string quartet of conservatory students who'd volunteered their time. Sister Margaret walked down the aisle first, beaming with pride, followed by Katie Henderson, who'd insisted on being flower girl despite having been adopted only weeks earlier. Then the main doors opened, and Hazel appeared. She wore a simple but elegant white dress that emphasized her natural beauty rather than overwhelming it. Her hair was styled in loose curls that framed her face, and she carried a bouquet of white roses mixed with children's drawings of flowers. But what took Dylan's breath away was her smile. Pure joy, uncomplicated by doubt or fear. As she walked toward him, Dylan could see the children from Riverside Haven lining the walls, dressed in their finest clothes and radiating excitement. Tommy sat in the front row, having been placed with a wonderful family in Brookline the week before, but insisting on attending Miss Hazel's Princess Day. Media representatives occupied the back rows, their cameras and recording equipment documenting everything. But Dylan barely noticed them. His attention was completely focused on the woman walking toward him, choosing their shared future despite all the obstacles and opposition they'd faced. When Hazel reached the altar, she handed her bouquet to Katie and took Dylan's hands. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "You look happy," she whispered back. The ceremony was officiated by a justice of the peace who specialized in adoption proceedings, making the connection to the children's home even more meaningful. As they exchanged vows, Dylan felt the profound rightness of their choice echoing through every word. "Dylan," Hazel said when it was her turn to speak, "3 weeks ago, you asked me what I would do with unlimited resources. Today, I have my answer. I would choose to build a life with someone who sees abundance not as accumulation, but as the ability to give love freely and without reservation." "Hazel," Dylan replied, "you taught me that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold. Trust, kindness, authentic connection, the family we choose to create. You gave me all of those things before I ever gave you anything in return." When the justice pronounced them married, the children's home erupted in cheers. Tommy jumped to his feet, shouting, "Miss Hazel is a princess now," while Katie threw flower petals in the air with wild abandon. Dylan and Hazel's first kiss as husband and wife was witnessed by 50 children who understood better than anyone what it meant when two people chose to love each other completely. 6 months later, Hazel looked up from her desk as Dylan entered her office, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the relaxed expression of a man who'd found his purpose. Through the window behind her, the Charles River sparkled in the afternoon sunlight. "How was the site visit?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Incredible. The new educational programs are exceeding every projection. Marcus is going to Harvard in the fall with a full scholarship. Katie's adoption is final next week. And Tommy." Hazel's smile was radiant. Tommy wrote a poem about feeling safe for the first time in his life. Dylan felt the familiar warmth that came with knowing their work was changing lives in measurable ways. The Cross Foundation had expanded beyond Riverside Haven to support 12 children's facilities across Massachusetts, with plans for national growth within 2 years. "Oh, and I have news," Hazel continued, her eyes bright with excitement. "Good news or great news. Life-changing news." Dylan's breath caught. "Are you?" "I'm pregnant." Hazel's smile could have powered the entire city. About 8 weeks along. Dylan was around her desk and pulling her into his arms before she could say another word. As he held his wife, feeling her laughter against his chest, he thought about the experimental credit cards that had started this whole journey. He'd been testing whether unlimited resources would reveal people's true nature. What he discovered instead was that love multiplied when shared, that authentic connection was worth any amount of money, and that the best investment he'd ever made was trusting his heart over his fears. "I love you, Mrs. Cross," he whispered against her hair. "I love you too, Mr. Cross. Both of you." Outside their office window, the city of Boston hummed with life and possibility. Somewhere in that city, children who'd been forgotten were learning that they mattered. Families were being formed through choice rather than chance. And 2 people who'd found each other across the divide of different worlds were building something beautiful together. The experiment was over. The real life had just begun. Sometimes the most profound discoveries come not from testing others, but from having the courage to be tested ourselves. Love, it turns out, isn't about unlimited resources. It's about unlimited trust, unlimited kindness, and the willingness to choose connection over protection, again and again. What experiments in your own life have led to unexpected revelations? How has love surprised you when you least expected it? Share your stories in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more tales of authentic love conquering all obstacles. 2 years later, the Cross Foundation's annual gala filled the ballroom of the Boston Harbor Hotel, but this wasn't the typical charity event of Dylan's former social circle. Children from foundation programs served as hosts, sharing their stories directly with donors. Adoptive families mingled with social workers. College students funded by foundation scholarships presented their research projects. Dylan adjusted his bow tie as he watched his very pregnant wife greet guests with the grace of someone born to this role, despite having entered it from such humble beginnings. At 8 months pregnant, Hazel glowed with the particular radiance of impending motherhood and professional fulfillment. Mr. Cross, a young man approached with confident strides. Marcus Chen, now a Harvard sophomore majoring in education policy, extended his hand. Thank you for everything. I'm presenting my research on foster care reform to the state legislature next month. Hazel will be so proud. She already is. She's been my unofficial advisor since freshman year. Across the room, Dylan spotted familiar faces he hadn't seen in 2 years. The sight made him pause. Vivian Sterling stood near the silent auction tables, looking elegant as always but somehow diminished. She was with a man Dylan didn't recognize, someone considerably older and less successful than her usual companions. When their eyes met across the room, Vivian lifted her chin defiantly before turning away. She's been trying to get back into society circles, Jake's voice came from behind him. But word got around about the newspaper thing. Most people won't take her calls anymore. And the others? Candace moved to Los Angeles. Last I heard, she was dating some reality TV producer. Brooke tried to start her own consulting firm, but she couldn't get clients after the scandal. She's working for a mid-level investment company in Chicago now. Dylan felt no satisfaction in their downfalls, just a distant sadness for the choices they'd made. Good to know. Boss, you should see this. Jake handed him a tablet showing the foundation's annual report. 47 children adopted this year. 63 college scholarships awarded. 12 new children's homes opened across New England. The numbers were impressive, but Dylan was more interested in the qualitative measures. Letters from grateful families. Photos of graduation ceremonies. Reports of children who'd aged out of the system successfully launched into independent adult lives. Uncle Dylan. A small voice interrupted his thoughts. Tommy, now 10 years old and thriving with his adoptive family in Newton, barreled into Dylan's legs with characteristic enthusiasm. The Hendersons had embraced the foundation community, often volunteering at events and maintaining connections with Riverside Haven. Hey, buddy. How's school? Great. I'm reading at a high school level now, and I'm teaching other kids how to play chess. Tommy's grin was infectious. Miss Hazel said the baby might come soon. Very soon. Will you teach the baby to play chess too? Absolutely. As Tommy ran off to find other foundation kids, Dylan reflected on how dramatically his definition of family had expanded. The foundation wasn't just charitable work, it was an extended family network of people committed to ensuring no child faced the world alone. Sister Margaret approached, moving slowly but with the same warm energy she'd always radiated. Now in her 60s, she served as the foundation's senior advisor, her decades of experience invaluable in program development. Dylan, have you seen the final adoption numbers for Riverside Haven this year? Hazel mentioned them this morning. 15 successful placements. 16. The Morrison family just finalized their adoption of 2 siblings this afternoon. Sister Margaret's smile was radiant. When I think about where we were 3 years ago, struggling to fund basic programs, and where we are now. Where we are now is exactly where Hazel always knew we could be. She's remarkable, and you've been the perfect partner for her vision. Dylan looked across the room to where Hazel was deep in conversation with a group of teenagers from the Foundation's mentorship program. Even 8 months pregnant, she was fully engaged, listening intently to their ideas for peer support initiatives. Mr. Cross. Another voice interrupted his observation. Dylan turned to find a woman in her 30s, professionally dressed but with kind eyes that reminded him of Hazel. "I'm Dr. Patricia Williams from Children's Hospital. I wanted to thank you and your wife personally. The Foundation's medical fund covered my daughter's surgery last year when we were between insurance policies." "Your daughter was one of our kids?" "Foster care from ages 6 to 16. Aged out of the system and put herself through college working multiple jobs. The Foundation's scholarship program made medical school possible." Dr. Williams's voice carried deep emotion. "She's going to specialize in pediatric trauma because she wants to help children like she used to be." These were the stories that made everything worthwhile. Children who'd been written off by society, given opportunities to transform not just their own lives but the lives of others. "Dr. Williams, would you be willing to speak at our next board meeting? We're always looking for examples of long-term impact." "I'd be honored." As the evening wound down, Dylan found himself on the hotel's terrace overlooking Boston Harbor. The December air was crisp, the city lights reflecting off the water like scattered diamonds. Hazel joined him, moving carefully but determinedly. "Shouldn't you be inside where it's warm? I needed a moment to process everything." She leaned against the railing beside him. 2 years ago, I was a housekeeper taking night classes and volunteering in my spare time. Tonight, I watched children who were once considered hopeless present research to some of the most influential people in Boston. Proud of what we've built. Overwhelmed by what we've built. Hazel turned to face him. "Dylan, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't given me that credit card?" "Every day. And I realize that some experiments are designed not to test the subjects, but to teach the experimenter." Dylan pulled her closer, feeling their baby kick against his hand. "I thought I was studying human nature when unlimited resources were available. What I was really discovering was what love looks like when it's given freely. No regrets. Only one." "What's that?" "That it took me 32 years to understand the difference between being wealthy and being rich." Hazel smiled, the expression transforming her already beautiful face into something luminous. "And what's the difference? Wealth is what you accumulate. Richness is what you share." A contraction made Hazel gasp suddenly, her hand gripping Dylan's arm. "Was that?" "I think our daughter is ready to meet the world." 2 hours later, in the maternity ward of Massachusetts General Hospital, Elizabeth Margaret Cross made her entrance into a world already prepared to love her unconditionally. She was surrounded by an extended family that included not just her parents, but Sister Margaret, Jake, the Hendersons with Tommy and Katie, Marcus, and several other Foundation alumni, and even some of the older children from Riverside Haven who'd insisted on being present for this moment. As Dylan held his daughter for the first time, he thought about the credit card experiment that had started this entire journey. He'd wanted to understand what people would do with unlimited resources. The answer, he now knew, was simple. The right people would create love, build families, and ensure that no one faced the world alone. Elizabeth Margaret Cross opened her eyes and looked directly at her father, as if she already understood that she'd been born into a world where love multiplied rather than divided, where abundance meant having enough to share, and where family was something you built through choice rather than circumstance. The experiment was complete. The real life was just beginning. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.